My name is Diane Strong, and I'm the Executive Director of Bourbon on the Banks Festival. So when I first moved to Kentucky in 1999, I was with my husband. We were a young couple and had no family here, had no friends. We bought our first house, and when family would come to visit, we did what you were supposed to do. We took them to Keeneland to see the horses, and we brought them to Buffalo Trace Distillery. And of course, we drove around to the horse farms and looked at those as well. But so we would do the tour, and actually, I do believe that Freddie led some of those tours, which is kind of cool. But at the end of the tour, they would give you the sample, and I would taste them. I was not a fan of bourbon, but I distinctively remembered the taste. And every year people would come out, which wasn't that often. When we would get to the end, that taste would remind me of the family. And so, you know, we would go for several years. When I finally moved to Frankfort, we got into the Bourbon Society here. And not because we liked bourbon, but because we wanted to meet people. And it turned out it was a great way to meet people and to start liking bourbon. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know at what point that conversion took over, but I know that every sip that I took leading up to there was so nostalgic that I never hated it. I actually really loved it, even though it wasn't necessarily agreeing with me, if that makes sense. I drink my bourbon neat. I prefer to not water it down. I know it changes the flavor. I tend to just prefer a neat flavor, or just the presentation that it has neat. And I've never been a fan of mixed drinks ever. I mean, to this day. So that's why I wouldn't mix it, you know, not because it's not good, but every bourbon comes with a story. Every distillery, every craft distillery, they all have a special story about what makes theirs special. And if you have the opportunity to listen to that and geek out over all the little details, and then of course you want to share that information with somebody, and so yeah, I mean, it brings you together. It gives you a reason to come together and something to talk about. I was asked to be the person in charge of the free festival that I named Bourbon Street on Broadway, which takes place during Bourbon on the Banks Festival. So that was 2019. And that was my event. And the executive director at the time, she moved on to other things after 2019. And in a roundabout way, they asked me to take over the event as director. So starting in 2020, I took over. This industry is filled with amazing people, and it's given me an opportunity to be very close to them, talk to them. It's opened a lot of doors, you know. When I say I'm doing my job, you know, they kind of have to let me get in there and talk to the right people. But yeah, I mean, it's given me a lot of opportunity. It gives me a reason to do my research by going to other bourbon events. And what I really love is troubleshooting, and I really love hospitality. So yes, I love working with the distilleries and working with all of the bourbon, special bourbon folks, but I really love the attendees, and I love bringing all of these people to Frankfort for one, and giving them just memories, you know, just a really genuine experience, and I want them to go away happy. So like, I love that when people have a question or a concern or whatever, they can't find their tickets, that when they call the phone number on the website, I answer the phone and I can solve their problems. And then while I'm talking to them, I can give them suggestions about where to stay. And what really makes the icing on the cake is when I am working at the event and they recognize me and they say, thank you for helping me. Because it happens all the time. So there's a lot. There's a lot to love. When I first took over, I look back and I realized how ignorant I was, which ignorance is bliss. And I think that that was really important because I did not know my boundaries and I didn't know what, isn't possible. And so as far as I was concerned, anything was possible. And that carried me a long ways. And when I run into issues now, I remember that, just because somebody says it can't be done, it's not necessarily the case. So as far as, there's a lot of obstacles and struggles along the way, but like I said, I love to troubleshoot and fix, and you always are tweaking. And at the end of the day, everything seems to happen for a reason, and, you come out on top and it's all good, It's about who you know, and I don't mean that like if you don't know the right people, you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, the people are there, and most of them are going to help you as much as they can. So don't be afraid to approach people. Don't be afraid to ask. If you want to be a distiller, go work at a distillery, go volunteer at a distillery, jump in, and it's a great community. Don't be afraid, and, you'll go as far as you want to go. I think a great way to enhance your palate is to learn about the bourbon before you bother tasting it. So it just changes everything about it. It gives you something to look for and something to pay attention to, and rather than focusing on the burn or the hug or anything like that, I think that helps a lot. The other thing I think, which is really cool if someone's kind of struggling with appreciating bourbon, is to not necessarily pair it. Now, this is something I learned from Chef Wita Michael, but having it with food in small sips, trying a piece of it, a food, and then doing the bourbon directly after it to bring out the different flavors that's in the bourbon. And that right there is a really unique experience as well. I think a person can appreciate bourbon some more. So like the short answer is to just make it more than just trying bourbon, and make it more of a story and a understanding of it. I just love the stories. I love the people behind the stories, and I love how it brings people together. Really, at the end of the day, we could be talking about pencils or something. If people could geek out over pencils the way they geek out over bourbon, it's so many good stories, so many good people that tell the stories everywhere you go. And I've shared bourbon with some amazing people. And there's also people that I didn't get a chance to share it with. And that, I think, is my bourbon story. I wish I could have had those opportunities. It's hard to explain. Like, my parents never came to visit us, and I know that they would have loved everything about Kentucky, and they would have loved the bourbon. I wish we could have shared some bourbon here. So Bourbon on the Banks Festival and all of its events, it has a huge supporter when it comes to the city. They work with us closely with logistics and making sure that we've got some of the manpower that we need. They've been great for us. I can't brag on the city of Frankfort enough with how wonderful they've been to work with. We couldn't do it without them, obviously.